Just give a quick intro in terms of where you're at with regards to circadian rhythm, maybe explaining, defining that.
So light is critical to health, and in fact, the light that we see is as important for your health as the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. And most people take light for granted, but the evidence has been building over the last 25 years or more that, in fact, if you're exposed to the wrong light at the wrong time, you have significantly increased risks of some major disorders and diseases. So, for example, in older populations, the risk of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease is almost doubled
Mm.
in people who are sleeping with the lights on at night. In other words, not sleeping in the dark. If you look at populations that are going outside, living, spend time outdoors, the people that can be up to 5 years increase in lifespan if you're exposed to sunlight during the day, as opposed to people who stay indoors and don't get sunlight. So this is a big topic, and of course, the diseases are more than just the obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. It also spreads into the immune disorders. Actually, hundreds of diseases now are linked. It spreads into psychiatric disorders, for example, anxiety and depression are significantly impacted. And this has been shown in very large studies. Some of them have had as many as almost 90,000 people in the studies tracking them, their light exposure and their disease risk. And it also linked to cancers. And there are certain cancers, particularly the endocrine sensitive cancers, that is, for example, breast cancer, prostate cancer in men, and of course, colorectal cancer, all of which are cancers that are, the incidence is increasing rapidly at this time. Breast cancer is increasing by 4% a year right now. Colorectal cancer by 2% a year, the incident rate. And that is, a lot of it is related to light exposure because we know from a variety of studies, and both in animal studies and human studies, that this is strongly linked. The disruption of our circadian clocks, the suppression of melatonin, and all sorts of effects of what's called circadian disruption, when the timing of our body gets out of whack because we're getting the wrong light at the wrong time.
Sure. Now, if you're listening out there, you're battling to lose fat. We just did a recent podcast on visceral adipose tissue, VAT, and how important that is. You're battling to lose weight. It could be the light that you're consuming. Your light diet, the artificial light or the sunlight you're getting could be causing you or impairing you to lose this, which is crucially important. It's 100% increase. So the hazard ratio is almost 2. From what I remember at medical school, I think the hazard ratio is increased from smoking was like 1.4, 40%. Is that still out there? Because people are really adamant on decreasing smoking. But then when you look at it, how important it is with regards to a hazard ratio of 2 when it comes to cardiovascular disease, that means 100% increase if you're listening out there for cardiovascular diseases. That's heart disease, such the number one killer still. I think Dr. De Martin said 50% increase in some of the cancers. So this is a real problem. Maybe you can just, expand on how important it is, because I don't think people realize how important it is, Dr. Martin.
Yeah, it's a vital subject. And, some people say, well, what's the evidence for something like breast cancer? Well, let's just take us through that. 100 years ago, breast cancer was a very rare disease in women. It was one of the rare cancers. And we now have it, of course, as the major, largest instance of cancer in women, the largest killer of women, number of deaths, and so forth. And that rate has been climbing, and it's been climbing for a number of reasons, but one of which is as electrification occurred and as now lights became available in the evenings over the course of the last 100 years, the risk of breast cancer has been climbing. And it has climbed from what used to be a baseline rate of about 20 women per 100,000 years, 20 cases per 100,000 women per year is the sort of baseline rate. It's climbed to about 140, from 20 to 140 in the most electrified societies in this world, which is in Western Europe, places like Belgium, Luxembourg, in that area, Netherlands, and also in the eastern United States, where there's considerable use of LED light and people are using LED lights at night. So this is, and these cancers, the rates are still increasing at 4% a year for breast cancer, 2% a year for colorectal cancer. Now, some of the interesting bits and pieces of this evidence chain is that blind women, or women who've been blind since early age, rarely get breast cancer. Again, people who are totally oblivious to light. Women who live in sub-Saharan Africa, in areas where there's no electrification yet, are at that 20 cases per 100,000 women, the baseline rate. And we know that a lot of the pathway is associated with the suppression of melatonin. So when you see light at night, and that's blue-rich light at night, it's the blue part of the spectrum that you need to be worried about. That blue-rich light, which is what the classic LEDs now produce, suppresses the level of melatonin. And melatonin is a critical antioxidant and a critical cancer cell suppressor. And you can show you can take human breast cancer tumors and plant them in rats or mice. You can show that grow them and they will grow in the rat or mice, but they grow much faster if the light's on at night with the rats. They will be suppressed if you infuse blood full of human melatonin. In other words, you collect blood from women who are sitting in the dark, so their melatonin levels are high, and you infuse it in the rats. It will suppress the cancer growth. If you have women sitting in the light at night with low levels of melatonin, same infusions, the cancer will accelerate. So we know a whole lot of the causal chain of this, but it's a big issue, and it is really due to the fact we've become obsessed with so-called energy-efficient lighting. Now, just to get into that just a little bit, what's used by the regulators is something called lumens per watt. So in other words, how much light is being produced by a light bulb for every watt of electricity that it consumes. So that's lumens per watt. And they've been cranking up the standards now from what used to be, incandescent light bulbs provide about 15 lumens per watt. They've cranked up the standard to now to over 100, and now it's heading towards 125 lumens per watt. But what they're measuring in a lumen, it's a 100-year-old measurement, is actually just the yellow and green in the light that is associated with the visual sensation of brightness. So in other words, what they're measuring is brightness. They're not measuring the other health-related content of the light. And in the light spectrum, which of course, the visible light spectrum includes violets and blues, greens, yellows, reds, and so forth. In that light spectrum, the blue is absolutely critical, whether you see it or not, in terms of disrupting your circadian clock. You need it during the day. You need to avoid it at night. Red is also critical for health and healing. And also we've got, besides in the natural light, we've also got ultraviolet light at one end of the spectrum, and we've got infrared. And there's a huge amount of work now showing that infrared light, which is produced by sunlight and is rich in daylight, is, by the way, produced by incandescent light bulbs and halogens that are now banned. That incandescent light is actually boosting mitochondrial, those are the energy packets in the cells, or energy producing organelles in every cell. Those are now the ATP production, the production of energy in those cells is boosted by infrared light and suppressed by the blue light around 450 nanometers that these LEDs push out. So what we're doing is, and that's pretty important for health and aging, because you can actually reverse disorders of aging by treating people with infrared light, treating animals with infrared light. So it's far more than just the blue. We've got a concern with all the parts of the spectrum, and we're really pretty dumb about using light now, because we take it so much for granted. If it looks white, I can see what I'm doing. It's aesthetically pleasing. Then it's just light, right? Yeah. Whereas in fact, it really matters what's in that light, and so much of what's in light you can't actually readily see.